Well, Doug Wilson did a recent video on how to educate your daughters. And I just thought when I watched this video, I was like, yeah, there's some decent advice there. But I just thought, what kind of men are in the CREC that he's having to give this kind of advice? Here, I'm like, man, these must be some real odd ducks to be given this type of advice. So let me go to the video and I'll give you a few comments here. But I don't know. Give me a like, subscribe, and give me a comment. Am I going crazy here? Or when I went through this video, I was like, who who is thinking these things in the church? I don't know. Anyway, let's go to it.
Statement of issue. In the burgeoning reaction to egalitarian feminism, a reactionary subculture started to take shape in the conservative evangelical world, one that is willing to disparage the idea of providing daughters with a rigorous education, particularly at the college level.
Okay, so just to state the problem, he'll go through it. He's saying to combat ephemism, egalitarianism, whatever in the church, there's a growing movement of men who aren't educating their daughters now, and they're not wanting them to go to college. And I just thought, what men where? Where are these men at? And the only place I can think of is this like something that's becoming commonplace in the CREC church? Like what? I have not met these men yet, and I know quite a few people. Like, where are these guys at again?
Below, I post 7 theses that indicate why I believe this is a really bad idea. It is important to state, however, that I'm talking about actual education and not what passes for it in these our dissolute and undisciplined times. Number 1. Femina adorans. This view that disparages education for girls is built on a fatal compromise regarding the purpose of education, categorizing it as a pragmatic vote-tech venture. This is the disease that has almost totally corrupted the world of higher education today. The thought is that college is there to prepare you for, quote unquote, a job. And because believing Christians know that a woman's focus and priority is supposed to be domestic and home centered, the idea is that college prep for that job is totally unnecessary. The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever, as the Catechism has it. The chief end of man is not to get a cushy job with corporate right out of college with a really good benefits package. Now, a lot of Christian reactionaries have reacted against this mentality and have done well as far as that goes, but they have still retained the idea that education is for a job. And because they think that a woman's job requires little more than possession of a womb and enough literacy to read the instructions on the side of a biscuit mix box, they consequently disparage the place of education in a woman's life. But the chief end of education should be the same as the chief end of man. Preparation for life should have the same end that life does, which is to glorify God. So the most important thing that any of us do is worship God on the Lord's Day. That should be the center of our lives. And a healthy worship service ought to be one that summons forth all our faculties. We are to love God, after all, with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Deuteronomy 6:5. If the chief end of man is to glorify God, and the center of our attempts to glorify him is the worship of God on the Lord's Day, and man is understood as being made up of male and female, Genesis 1:27, this means that the education that prepares us to worship God intelligently is as much for the girls as it is for the boys. Our goal for our girls should be to have them as educated as the Lord's mother was when the Archangel Gabriel appeared to her. A careful review of her Magnificat, likely the work of a girl still in her teens, reveals that she, at any rate, was no silly juggins. She knew how to glorify God, as we should all know. Number 2, wisdom.
All right, so let me freeze it there for a second. So I think what he's saying is women should be college educated just like men are so that they'll learn to glorify God in their homes as homemakers because they shouldn't be working outside of the home, which is fine. I think that's great if a woman wants to stay home. I think that's ideal and the best situation if a woman stays home, educates her children, and does what she should be, quietly working in the home, as Titus 2 says. That's great. But where I'm getting confused with Doug is like, so I think he's saying no, they should go to college. They should go to a Christian college, spend 4 years there, racking up. I mean, most of the Christian colleges cost about the same as, secular colleges. So you get a bunch of debt, rack it up, going to school so that you can be better prepared to worship God in your home as you're raising your children. Is that really necessary? Maybe I'm missing something here, but that seems a little odd. Like, okay, that to me seems like a big waste of time. Oh, and he mentions Mary, how she wrote the Magnificat, so she must have been very educated. Well, it's a very good possibility that Mary was illiterate. Like I'm gonna have to look that up. Hold on. So here's what I do a quick search. Here's what it said. This is kind of what I suspected. So women in Jewish society would have most likely not have been taught to read and write Could have been, but most likely, especially for the very poor, which they were, probably not. So Jewish society placed a high value on the oral tradition, and religious teachings were often passed down orally rather than through the written texts. And it was also more likely for the boys to be formally educated, reading, writing, that kind of stuff, than it was for the girls, who would have relied on the oral tradition much more. And so this quick search says it's probably more likely that Mary was illiterate than she was literate based on socioeconomic status and being a girl, not a boy, in that culture. And that's kind of what I thought. That's interesting. They mentioned the Magnificat. Now, just before I beat this dead horse too much, the Magnificat, Mary was filled with the Holy Spirit, and then she praised the Magnificat. All right, so this is not she was educated so well that that's what made her come out. No, this is like God is doing an amazing work, and he fills her with the Spirit, and she prays this. That's what I believed happened there, not like, oh, she was so well educated, she just pulled on all of her biblical knowledge and then had this wonderful prayer. I'm not seeing that. Let's go on.
Is a woman. The book of Proverbs personifies wisdom as a woman and does the same thing with folly. We have Lady Wisdom and Dame Folly set before us. A concrete example of this personification is found in Proverbs 31, but the range of her practical activities should be understood against the backdrop description of Lady Wisdom found earlier. And Lady Wisdom is the patroness of a great salon. Her house has 7 pillars, Proverbs 9:1, and she has mixed her wine beforehand, Proverbs 9:2. She has prepared the banquet, Proverbs 9:3, and has sent out her maidens to bring in all the guests to the grand reception. Anyone who believes that this does not involve the life of the mind is out of their mind. We return to the inescapable concept of not whether but which. If men deliberately discourage their daughters from emulating Lady Wisdom, then the end result of that fatherly folly is going to be their daughters emulating Dame Folly.
So, just as a quick note, I think all of those things that Doug just named off from Lady Wisdom could be done from oral tradition with tribal knowledge that the grandma passes down to the daughter. Like, I don't see any of these things like needing formal education for. Like, I think I'm missing the boat on that one as well. Let's go on.
Number 3, resisting the serpent. The long war between God and Satan began in the garden and resulted in the overthrow of the woman. Through her, the man was tempted and also fell, thus plunging our race into the chaos and darkness of sin. When God expelled them both from the garden, he did not leave them without hope, in that he promised that the seed of the woman would eventually have the woman's revenge, and the head of the serpent's seed would be crushed. Genesis 3:15. The serpent, therefore, has a particular malevolence against women. Woman is the glory of man, and the serpent loves nothing more than to defile and deface that glory. He has a low view of women, and when Christian men begin to reinforce the assumptions that contribute to such a low view, they are working contrary to God's purpose and plan. Some men talk as though they want.
So, hold on a second. I think he's saying men who don't want their daughters to be educated formally into college, they have a low view of women. And again, I'm saying, like, where are these men at? Like, who the men I know, they darn near worship women. And I'm like, is there something going on in the CREC with these? Where are these guys at? I haven't met these guys before. I'd like to know where these guys are located. This just seems strange to me. Give me a comment though. Did anybody watch this video? And I'll put a link to it. Just seems odd. All right.
Their daughters to be nothing more than a drudge, capable of following simple instructions. But we should be wanting our daughters to grow up into mature women capable of giving the instructions, Proverbs 31:27. We should want them to become caryatids, sculpted in palace style, Psalm 144:12. We should be eager for our daughters to be able to conquer with a glance, Psalm 6:10. We should want them to be ingenious and cunning with their hands, Jeremiah 10:9, Exodus.
Boy, that's exactly when I think of a good wife, an attractive wife, that's exactly what comes to mind. Someone who is giving commands, telling instructions. They're able to conquer with a glance. I know, I'm sure Doug doesn't mean it to sound this way, but that certainly sounds like more boss babe language for our current culture that we have. I was just like, the strong, independent woman, rah rah, six boom bah. That's what. Now I know Doug doesn't believe that. I know that for sure. But it's just the way that comes across. It's like, wow. I guess this is to combat what's going on in the CREC circles or something. I don't know. I just again, this just seems like kind of a bizarre video to put out.
It is 35:25. We should want them at some point to be numbered among the wise women. 2 Samuel 20:16. We should want them to enter into their domestic calling as a high vocation, as mistress of the domain. Titus 2:5. We should want them to resemble the Shekinah glory, for a glory and a covering. Isaiah 4:5, 1 Corinthians 11:15. That is how we
Hey, I like those last three. Those are good. I'll get on board with those. Oh, that's great.
answer the serpent. Number 4, companion in marriage. Christians have traditionally
Oh man, here we go. Here we go. All right.
held that the purposes of marriage are threefold: the propagation of godly seed, Malachi 2:15, the prevention of uncleanness, 1 Corinthians 7:2, and the companionship of a true helper, Genesis 2:18. This third purpose should take up at least some of our attention. A man and a woman should be able to talk about more than the weather, or Johnny's report card, or what's for dinner, or if dinner is occurring, whether or not the mashed potatoes should be passed. This does not mean that husband and wife need to have specialized knowledge in identical areas, although that can be nice, but it does mean that a general liberal arts education that enables you to ask intelligent questions about a subject outside your expertise is going to be a true aid and comfort. The word companion comes from
Oh man, come on. Okay, so if I'm understanding Doug right, a general liberal arts education, I think at the college level, he's saying, is going to make your wife a better companion because she'll be able to pontificate more eloquently on subjects that you'll find interesting. I can't remember if it was like one of the Seneca early philosophers, if it was like, it might have been Karl Marx or something. I can't remember. But one of them that said he didn't want to get married because when he would get married, then he would have to have conversation with his wife and he wouldn't want to listen to her blubbering about whatever kind of woman problem she has. He wanted to talk the deep philosophical things, blah, blah, blah. And so I think, which I can kind of understand. And I think if I'm hearing Doug right, he's saying, well, your daughter needs to be educated in the liberal arts so that she can talk the deep philosophical things. Has anybody ever heard a woman talk deep philosophical things? If you have one that can and that will and that enjoys it, you have a rare, probably 0.1% woman. And I don't think it's because they're not going to college. Women go to college more than men now. And I'm sure Doug would probably respond, well, that's because they're not educating them in the right subjects, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, I mean, a lot of them get liberal arts degrees. You ever talk to a liberal arts girl? I mean, you think she can just pontificate? You just, oh, I just love listening to your thoughts on this, blah, 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 blah. Probably not. I mean, I should hopefully my wife's not gonna listen to this, but a lot of times there's a lot of days I just want to talk to my boys. I want to talk with the bros about man stuff. I don't want to talk about women problems and blah 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 blah. Right? I just don't. I don't want to hear your take on politics and blah 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 blah. It's all just feelings and emotions and blah blah blah. I don't. I don't. I don't know. I don't think I'm identifying with Doug here. Give me a comment below. I don't know. Let's go on.
from two Latin words, one meaning with and the other panis, meaning bread. A companion is one who shares your bread. There will be more than a few times when you want to talk about more subjects than just the bread. Number 5, lowering the bar.
Okay, so again, yeah, you got to pass the bread, share some bread, talk about things. And you got to have a college educated wife in the liberal arts, very well rounded, so that you can have great conversation at the dinner table as you spent probably $150,000 on this education. Okay.
Reducing educational expectations for daughters is a surreptitious way of lowering expectations for your future sons-in-law. Men of sense do not want silly wives, said Mr. Knightley, and he's a man to be heeded when it comes to this. Silly women can be powerfully attractive, but it is worth asking exactly what kind of men they are likely to attract. There are two main categories. There are the clever but unscrupulous men who simply see an opportunity to get someone simple-minded to sleep with them. I saw a comedian once who said that it was really important to be able to recognize intelligent women because, as he put it, the dumb ones are quote-unquote mine. So that would be an obvious problem. The other category likely to be attracted would be men who are not men of sense. Silly women attract silly men, and those silly men will frequently want to marry the silly women because they think they found their soulmate, and perhaps they have. So a father who deliberately handicaps his daughter is increasing the chances that men of sense are going to stay away. Number 6.
So hey, here's I think if I'm hearing him right, here's what's implicit in that. If we formally educate our daughters well enough, then they'll pick good spouses. Hmm. I'm not sure. I mean, I've got two daughters. I want them to be wise. I want them to know, but I'm pretty sure me sending them to college is not going to make them wise to pick a good husband. In fact, I've told my oldest daughter, listen, when you get of age, me and your brothers, we're just gonna pick you out a husband. Okay. Now she doesn't like that when I say that. I'm kind of half joking, but I'm gonna be on the lookout, and I'll be like, hey, that guy, I think he's pretty good. You need to go and talk to him. Right. But if we can just educate the women enough, so I guess maybe if you have a master's or a PhD, then you'll probably be even more likely to pick well a mate. I don't think that's true. I don't know. And I still wonder, like, why is Doug putting out this video? Like, what is going on with the dudes in the CREC that he's got to put a video out like this?
Leveling downward. All of these issues are connected. This approach fails even when measured by the metric that it ostensibly sets up for itself, prioritizing the education of sons. But what about grandsons? The level of education that your daughters receive will be roughly equivalent to the level of education that your grandsons will receive. If your daughter has a blinkered view of the world and she attracts a like-minded husband, then that is what your grandsons are going to grow up with. You cannot take this kind of thing away from your daughters because they do not share your sex without also taking it away from your grandsons who do share it. If your daughter lives in a world with a low ceiling, then her kids will also live there. And if your poorly educated daughter manages to marry a man of educational distinction, then your grandsons are going to grow up in a divided home. If they go with their mother, then it will be the same result as above. If they go with their father, then you will have dodged the educational bullet, but at the expense of like-mindedness and harmony in that home. Households where everyone respects and honors educational achievement will be households that will most likely produce children who will achieve in that way. Households where this is not valued will hit what they aim for.
All right. So if you marry a woman who's not well educated, then I think what Doug is saying is your sons and your grandsons are not going to value education very much. And so they're going to be dummies. All right. Now, Luke, do you think that's true? Oh, you do think? Okay. All right. Well, Luke thinks that's true. I don't know if I'm convinced that's true. I really don't. I mean, I think intelligence is largely a heritable trait. So I don't know. Like, well, boy, if your wife doesn't like it, then you just have a bunch of dummies around. Like, I mean, I guess mom does need to help do homework with kids and whatever. So maybe that's true. But I don't know if I'm convinced. I don't know. I'm not. All right, let's go to the last one here.
Number 7, answering feminism. This view tends to reinforce the mistaken idea that the only thing necessary to develop a biblical worldview about life between the sexes is to hold a position that angers and annoys the feminists. If it ticks the feminists off, it must be biblical. This cannot be right because thinking biblically is a true and genuine challenge, an intellectual discipline, while angering feminists is really easy.
All right, well, that's the end of the video, and I don't know if I'm convinced. I still just wonder. Angering the effinists is funny. But I don't know if I'm convinced that this is really the reason why you should send your daughter to a college for a 4-year liberal arts degree so that your sons will be smart, your grandsons will be too, and you'll have better conversation at the dinner table. I don't know. Hey, give me a comment. I don't know. I don't know about that. I just wonder what's going on in the CREC. What are these guys doing that are, you know, fathers in the CREC? That makes me wonder. Do you wonder too, Luke?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wonder too. I don't know. It makes me wonder. But I am glad. I'm glad of one thing, that Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Post Millennial Man.